apparently, the way my understanding is, she says, well, we don't really care what you do there. And he took it as an okay to just go in and invade. And the basis for why he wanted to do that was apparently Kuwait was drilling for oil and using it in a way that they could get the Iraq oil, and of course, yes, Kuwait was a province of Iraq at one time. So he had his justifications, and to me, her saying what she did, if this is true, and I'm asking you because I think you would probably know that he took it as, go ahead and do it. I mean, he was an ally of us against or we were an ally with him when he went to war against Iran and provided him all kinds of,
right. I mean, Colin Powell was asked how we knew they had chemical weapons, and he said, because we kept the receipts. I think they did have that conversation. I don't think there's any question that he concluded from that conversation that he had a green light from the United States. What she actually said, we don't know, and whether she meant quite to go that far, we don't know. But it is certainly the case that the previous administration, the Reagan administration in particular, but even the Bush administration, was very friendly with him. And Reagan, you remember, sent Donald Rumsfeld for a private meeting with him. And I don't think he would have gone in if he knew we were going to come back after him. It wasn't worth the risk. And of course, as always the case, if you go back in the history, the question of whether Kuwait is really free, and whether it was a plot is always in doubt. Nevertheless, Kuwait was a member of the UN, it was an independent country, and it was invaded. And I think whatever mixed signals we may have sent, that we had no choice but to go with. Yes.
Yeah, Lord, just to go back briefly to the War Powers Act or the War Powers Resolution, some of us are hoping that President Obama will be the first since 1973 to acknowledge some formal role in Congress in initiating the use of military force abroad. Recently, there was a commission, the Baker-Christopher Commission, which at least as some of us have read it, would simply leave war powers at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There was an earlier study, actually by the Constitution Project associated with this institution, deciding to use force abroad, war powers, and a system of checks and balances.
Yeah, I'm in it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm asking you the question. What are the practical chances with President Obama in office of moving to fix the War Powers Act, make it sensible, viable, and workable, and constitutional? And is it something that we should get behind, and how do we do that?
I would say it's close to zero. When the proposal in the Baker-Christopher thing, which you described as a step backwards, the executive branch would describe as a totally unacceptable step. And I actually know that to be true, because it's not a new proposal. Warren Christopher was the Deputy Secretary of State in the Carter administration. And when he left, he went back to practice law in California and wrote one article on foreign policy during the 12 years, I guess, that he was out. And that was an article on war powers, in which he made exactly the proposal that's in that article, which is for some version of this consultative committee. And then he came back in, he was the Secretary of State at the beginning of the Clinton administration. I was in the Pentagon working for Les Aspin, and the NSC called a meeting on war powers. So I said to Les Aspin, here's what you do. You go in and advocate the proposal that's in Warren Christopher's article. And you'll have the Secretary of State on your side, and it's not a great thing, but at least it's some motion forward on the issue. So Aspin loved it. He read the article. I did a memo for him. He came into the meeting. He proposed this. And the Secretary of State, one Warren Christopher, spoke strongly against it. And his explanation was, that's a good proposal when they have the presidency, when we have the Congress, but it's a very bad proposal when we have the presidency. And I think one of the most depressing things about Washington is how quickly people, when they come to office, whether they're moving, and Obama's the first one to move from the Congress since Kennedy, but whether they come from the Congress or elsewhere, they very quickly discover how hard it is to get anything done in the executive branch, and therefore how uninterested they are in consultation with the Congress. So I would not hold out much hope that Obama will bring a constitutional perspective or a legislative perspective to this. He will bring a presidential perspective. And I'm afraid this has to be the last one.
Morty, everything you say is correct, as a Polish rabbi once said. Was the Constitution wrong? Because clearly, the way the United States is now functioning is essentially inconsistent with the Constitution. I don't think there's any question about it. So was the Constitution wrong, or is there something wrong with us today that we're unable to get back to something like an original understanding of the Constitution?
Morton, could you repeat that question?
The question was, we're clearly not following the Constitution. Was the Constitution wrong, or do we need to find a way to get back to it? I guess the Constitution is my Bible, so I believe it can't be wrong. It's infallible.
And therein lies the problem.
But I think the problem is that there are very few people who are prepared to live by the Constitution as it was written. That we all have provisions of the Constitution that we say are outmoded, we need a modern understanding, we need to see it grow and change. So maybe they meant to ban guns, but that doesn't make sense. Maybe meant not to ban guns, but that doesn't make sense in the 21st century. Maybe they meant to make it hard to go to war, but that doesn't make sense in the 21st century. And I guess for all of us, inevitably, our understanding of the Constitution is shaped more by how we think that will affect the policy outcomes that we want than by our attempt to really understand what the Constitution means. And I think that's unfortunate, but I think it's the reality of life. And with that, I just want to
I'd like to make one comment, Mr. Halperin. I'm very distressed to hear this description of what I think is a decision by a generation of leaders to abandon the Constitution, which is what Benjamin Franklin said could possibly happen.
Well, I think it is. That's what I've said it is. I mean, I think that beginning with the Korean War, the Congress and the President have conspired to ignore the constitutional requirement that the Congress is responsible for war. The Congress, because it doesn't want the responsibility, and the President, because he doesn't want the responsibility. And I would like to see us go back to the original understanding, but I don't know how to do it. So I leave you on that pessimism. Thank you.
Morton, thank you so much. You really give us a feeling that we've been there. Maybe not that we've done that, but we greatly appreciate that. And we'll take a 10-minute break.